Dr. Jazz.
From Slovenia.
Jazz.
I saw you here actually, like in shit. When was that? '97 or something like that, with Dave Gilmour and Matt Garrison. I think I was on that TV show. I don't know if you remember that. You did that like
Oh, yeah, I do
Brana.
actually,
Like
because
that
yeah, I
was.
do remember that. David sent me a clip from that recently.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, it was that was a fun gig. I was like, man, whew, who are these? And Matt was like, I don't know, such a youngster back then. Still, I remember. I was completely blown away. I was like, damn, incredible concert, by the way. So.
Thank
Uh,
you. Yeah, that was fun. That was a great trio.
That was a great trio, yeah. But you guys never recorded, right? Because I was searching for an album, but never in that lineup, right?
We never recorded with that lineup,
Yeah,
and we should actually. That would be great to go back and revisit that because I
yeah,
really enjoyed that band. There's a lot of freedom, just a lot of. I mean, it was a very powerful trio, but
yeah,
a lot of freedom, a lot of innovative playing and concepts. And they're just so proficient on their instruments. That was awesome.
yeah. It was a monster band. I mean, I bought Code Red like a couple of years before that, and I was starting with jazz, and I knew who Kenny Barron was. Like, okay, shit, I have to get this, and that's when I first heard you, and I really love the record still nowadays. I have a CD and just the tunes and the compositions, and I was like, man, okay, that's a killing
Thank
album
you.
still, yeah.
Thank
But
you.
I want to start this talk, but first, the last album I heard by you was "Give the Drummer Some," and I'm a guitarist, and I really love and that album because some of my favorite guitarists are there. Like, what's been happening on the band leading department with you? Like, have you been preparing something new as well, or
You're cutting out a little bit. What was the question?
if you have been preparing something new as a band leader, maybe?
Oh yeah, I have a new record that's all finished, and we've just been waiting on working out the deal, and hopefully that will be out in the spring. So just, been working on a way to get it out. I actually wanted it out in August, but it wasn't the best way to put it out. I was advised. And we needed a little more time to promote it. I was really excited to get it out right away, but that's not happened yet. But yeah, it's great. It's also got, you know, great guitarists on it. My core band is on it, which is Aurelian Budnik on guitar and Felix Pastorius, some bass, Emilio Modeste on
Oh,
saxophone.
beautiful.
Zakai Curtis on the keyboards, and then we've got guests. Matt Garrison is on one track, trio piece with he and Carlos Santana.
Ooh, okay,
Carlos is on like four other tracks, and John McLaughlin and Carlos are on one track together.
beautiful. Oh man,
Also,
looking for.
we have strings done by Dave Egger, and Ray Angry is a keyboard player is also featured on one track.
Mm. Wow, beautiful. Have you written the music or you composed the music? Is it your stuff?
I composed some of the songs are completely my compositions. There are a couple that Aurelian composed. There are some songs that are not originals, and then there are songs that the band composed together.
Okay, yeah.
Like I brought in like a sketch, and I wanted everybody to contribute to finish. So and then some sketches we just made up as we were going, and we're like, okay, let's go this direction, that direction. And I really wanted that because I wanted input from the rest of the band. I wanted their voices heard. Obviously in their contributions to the improvisation
Yeah.
and to the group play, but I also wanted their input in terms of putting the material together. So we achieved that on this record. I'm really happy about that.
No,
It's
really cool.
definitely a band record.
Yeah, yeah. Where does this come from you? I mean, you have been basically quite a prolific composer, since the beginning. And where does this compositional aspect come from with you? I mean, you've written, I remember that Wallace Roney record. I still have I think there's like a tune by you. Some.
On his first record,
Yeah, yes,
Versus.
the Christ, something with Christ. I forgot the name of your tune.
Um, on
Sometimes my heart
Versus,
cries. Sometimes my heart cries. I think that's yours, right?
Sometimes My Heart Cries is on a different record, but
Oh
on
yeah,
Verse, that's my song, yeah.
yeah,
And that was really influenced by that by Miles's band, of course. Um, but on Verses, all my songs are actually very influenced by that band and by those composers because they're my favorites. But on Verses, which is his Wallace's first
yeah,
record, he he used two of my compositions. One is called Topaz, and the other one's called Float.
yeah,
And I was writing around, like, just around the house and writing things for myself, not thinking they would go anywhere. And he heard those pieces and he said, I love these. I want to record them on my record. I said, really? You want something I wrote? Because I just did it for myself. I didn't do it thinking of anything except, just the expression of the harmonies, trying to find harmonies and trying to learn about harmony and loving melody,
yeah,
and putting that together with whatever rhythms, I was thinking of. And so I was really, really inspired when he said that he wanted to record those pieces. So that was the first time that any of my pieces were recorded.
yeah.
And that's how I got my first record date, actually. Because I went to the session. On that session, Tony Williams played drums, and I was able to be a fly on the wall at the
Oh man,
sessions. Not,
yeah,
not, I mean, at the rehearsals, I went because I had compositions that they were performing. And that's a whole nother story, which is also incredible. But at the recording session, I went because Tony was in town recording something with Yoko Ono, but he used rental drums. So he didn't have any drums. And I was like, well, he can use my drums. I have his setup, I have his sticks,
oh
I
man,
have everything. Um, and so I was his drum tech that day.
wow,
And so I brought my kit there. So I was at the session. Um, and when the session ended, um, Michael Kuskuna, the producer, and Joe Fields from the label, Muse Records, they came over to me and they said, "Wow, we love your compositions. Do you have more?" And I said, "Yeah, I write all the time." And so Joe Fields said, "Well, you want to record your own record?"
wow,
And I said, "My own record? I never even thought I would get to that." Well, yes. So that's the way that started.
wow. How was it like for you spending the time with Tony? I mean, have you met Tony before, by the way?
Yes.
Before that
Yeah.
session? Okay.
I had met him before that session, and the way that I met him was interesting too, because I was doing a gig with Don Pullen
Yeah.
outside of Washington, D.C., and Wallace was actually playing in D.C. I forget with who. Maybe he was playing at Blues Alley or something. I don't remember. But Tony was playing at the Kennedy Center with Herbie, Ron, and Dizzy Gillespie. And so we didn't have tickets. And Wallace said, well, you know what? I used to live in DC. I know how to sneak into the Kennedy Center. So after our gigs, we met at the Kennedy Center and we snuck in. And I'm walking around with a stick bag and I'm thinking, okay, if somebody asks me why I'm here backstage and who I'm here playing with, what can I say? I can't say I'm playing with so and so because Al Foster's playing with them. I can't say I'm playing with this person because Elvin's playing with them. I can't say I'm playing with them because Tony's playing with them. I don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm walking around trying to find this Tony concert because we wanted to see Dizzy and Herbie and Ron and Tony. And somebody says, "Hey, is that a stick bag on your back?" And I said, "Yeah." And the guy said, "Do you have brushes in there?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh," he said, "My name is Lee and I'm Tony Williams' drum tech and I forgot to pack
Oh
brushes.
man.
And Dizzy wants brushes on the ballad because on the first show, Tony played sticks on the ballad because he didn't have any brushes. Can I borrow your brushes?" I said, "He can have the brushes." I said, "Are you kidding? Tony's my hero." I said, "Can I come too? Can I come with him?" He said, "Yeah." So he got us in. We were on the side of the stage. And that day is the first day I met Tony.
Wow, man.
Yeah, after the show, I got to meet him, and he was really sweet, very nice. He thanked me for the brushes. I was like, "You can have them. Are you kidding? It'd be my honor for you to take those brushes." So I
Wow.
don't know what he did with them, but he kept them.
Uh, did he remember you later when you met in New York?
Yes,
He did,
yeah. He
right? Yeah.
actually gave me his number, and I was like, okay. And I have a mutual friend who also knows Tony, another drummer, a young drummer. And I told him, and I said, but I can't call him. He's my hero. I'm scared. I don't know what I would say. And he's like, you should call him, just say hi and just see what he tells you. Maybe he'll get into some conversations about drums, about Miles. I said, I can't. I'm too nervous. I can't even dial the number. Um, and then I don't know, one day I got the nerve to call him and just say hi. And then we started having these conversations. And the way that I got the nerve to call him was that Jimmy Cobb, who I love, um, and I used to go see all the time.
Sure. Mm.
He was at Sweet Basil's one week, and I went down at the beginning of the week, and he said, "Are you going to be here at the end of the week?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm coming every day that I can." And he says, "Okay, come on such and such a day." And I said, "Okay." I think it was the Sunday or the Saturday. And he said, "I've got something I want to give you." And so he gave me a symbol that Tony had given him
Mm.
when Tony joined Miles. And he said, I've never played this symbol. It was too washy for me, but Tony gave it to me and I want you to have it." And I was like, "Oh, really?"
Oh,
Okay. So that gave me the nerve to call Tony and tell him about the symbol. And I said, "Are you okay with the fact that Jimmy gave it to me?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Play it." And so I hit it a couple times. He says, "Ooh, dark and pretty." And so that's kind of started a friendship, you know?
wow, that's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. How was it like for you, being a young drummer in the 80s? Because when I think about it, like everyone was alive still, right? Like Max Roach was alive, Arzt was alive, Philly Joe Jones, Elvin Jones. I mean, Tony, I can just go on. How was the vibe like for you when you came to New York and, seeing all these amazing people? I mean, do you remember that?
Of course, I could never forget it. That was like the most exciting time in my life. I
Hmm.
will never, ever forget that. I mean, in addition to those incredible innovators that you mentioned, Art Blakey was alive, and, Ed Blackwell, Billy
Oh, Ed
Higgins,
Blackwell,
Al
yeah, sure.
Foster, Billy Hart, who's still with us, fortunately, was playing everywhere. Lewis Hayes, who's with us still,
Yeah,
fortunately, was playing around and hanging out. All these incredible musicians, and even, like just non-drummers. Sam Jones, I met him, the great bass player.
yeah, sure. Wow.
Sonny
Yeah,
Rollins was hanging around and playing. Dizzy, Woody Shaw, Dexter Gordon. I remember standing in a line on Christmas Eve at the Vanguard outside in a blizzard to see the Dexter Gordon Woody Shaw band play.
mm,
And just those times were just incredible. Roy Haynes, hanging out with him. And it was Arthur Taylor, we became friends.
really. Wow.
Um, it was I was like a kid in a candy store because all my heroes were either living in New York or coming through. And Tony didn't live in New York, but he came through New York all the time. Herbie and Wayne didn't live there, but they came through New York. Ron Carter still lives there,
Yeah.
So it was really amazing. I became really close with Art Blakey, and
Wow,
I
really.
babysat for his children. So I was at his house like every day. And, when he was in town, we hung and we talked, and he told me all kinds of stories. He talked about Horace Silver, and
Mm,
when Horace first joined the 17 Messengers, and he talked about Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, he talked about Bird, he talked about Max, he talked about everybody. He talked about Tony, he talked about Elvin, he loved Elvin, he loved Tony. He talked about all these cats and the whole scene, and
yeah.
what it was like to be a musician on the scene and to be a black musician on the scene in those times. He told me about times where, they had to they had a tour bus or cars or whatever they were riding around in, and they weren't always able to get hotels because they're black. So he said they had to find people who would allow them to park their vehicles behind their houses so they could sleep,
Mm,
especially in the South, where it was just crazy with open racism. Um, so the stories that he told me were just incredible. And you always left his presence being proud of who you were, being proud to be a jazz musician first, being proud to be a a woman, being proud to be a Black person, to be a Black woman, to be alive in that period, in that era. Whatever you were, he lets you see the value of you. So
Mm.
you understood the value of the chair that you hold as a drummer, you know, the seat that you hold at the jazz table, you know, the creative table, um, and then to be alive at that time, you know, all those things, he really showed you the value of all of them. So you left his presence on cloud nine. You always did, because you knew that this was a very, very special um, energy to be involved with, in
Yeah.
terms of being involved with creative music. And you left knowing that you had, like, the world as your oyster, in terms of you being a creative uh, aspect of what was happening. You know, so it just made you proud, and it made you inspired, and it made you dig and go for more. You know,
Mm.
so Blakey, you know, when he passed, um, it left a huge gap and hole in the scene that hasn't really been filled yet,
Mm.
you know, because he was so um, integral in terms of having young musicians
Yeah.
flock to New York to play with him. Everybody wanted to sit in with Art Blakey. Everybody wanted to play with him. You know, it was like a rite of passage to go through his band. You know, for drummers, it was a rite of passage for him to have you come up and sit in. You know, and he had us come and sit in, all the young cats. You know, um, and it was like you were under his tutelage. I remember one time he was playing at the Village Gate, and I'll never forget, Walter Davis Jr. was on piano, and he
Mhm.
had such a big smile, and such a big happy sound, and he was such a joyous person. I just remember looking at him and focusing on him because I was nervous. But Art called me up to play, and they were playing a shuffle, and he said, Cindy. And I bent down so I could hear him because he was playing. He said, play this just like this and don't budge an inch. And he got up, and, you know, we transferred, and, you know, he was playing the cymbal while I was sitting down, and then I took over and I was playing, and he went on. I don't know where he went. He was gone for a while, you know, but I just played, and it was such a
Yeah.
great experience, but also a learning experience. And then to have Walter Davis there was great for me, because I just focused on him, because he was so uh, infectious with that incredible vibe, and of course his amazing playing.
Yeah.
But tons of Art Blakey stories. Just hanging out at his house, hanging out at the gigs. You know, one funny one is he had a baby grand piano in his living room and a snare drum. And the snare drum was broken. The top head was broken, so you couldn't play it, you know. And I was, like I told you, I was there so many
Yeah.
days of the week babysitting for his children, and I brought a new snare head, and I took it down there and I changed it and I tuned it, and I'm like, this is gonna make Art happy. You know, I tuned it, and Art had just come home from Europe or somewhere, I think from Europe, a tour. So I guess he was in his room sleeping, and his he had two boys, Akira and Kenji, and Akira was the oldest of the two boys. And Akira took a drumstick and he started banging on that drum head, and Art came out and he said, "Hey, who fixed that effing drum head?" And I was like, I shrunk. I was just
Oh
looking
shit.
at him. He knew I did it, because Anne, his wife, she probably didn't know how to change a drum head. And the boys were too small, you know. And his other son, who was in and out, Takashi, he probably wasn't even thinking about changing a drum head, you know. So he knew I did it. And then he never, you know, really busted me, but he just did say, "Who fixed this Evan drum head?" And he was looking at me, and I was like, "Oh, sorry."
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's just to be around him. And you know, him and Alvin, I think, were so important in that period, right? Alvin also, like the jazz machine. I think every horn player who's like around 50 now, went through that band, from Nick Payton to Redman through Javen Jackson to everyone, I think. Uh,
Robbie Coltrane,
Robbie
Antoine,
Coltrane, yeah,
all of
yeah,
them,
everyone,
all
yeah.
of them, I
So
mean,
important,
that
these guys.
was like, that was the place to be, I
Yeah,
mean, especially if you were a tenor player.
yeah.
Elvin, so innovative and such an amazing uh, instrumentalist and such an amazing drummer, and another Art Blakey tidbit is Art said to me one time, always keep your eye on Elvin Jones because you never know what he's going to do, you know? And Elvin was also very welcoming, as was Art to the young musicians,
Mm,
to drummers, to the whatever you played. Um, he was very warm and open. He loved the young cats and he wanted to see the music flourish, so he was always in your corner and pushing you, you know. Just really kind. I remember one time I went to the Vanguard to see him, and he had just gotten a new crop of K Zildjian cymbals. And so he said, "Do you like K cymbals?" And I said, "Yeah, I play them too. I love them." And he said, "Well, come here." And he was looking through and thumbing through, and he marked an X on all of the ones that he liked. And he picked out one, and he was playing different ones, and he picked out one, and he played, and he says, "This is for you, Cindy." I said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah." And he gave me, of course, I still have it. But
wow.
yeah, and his last, I started playing with Lenny, so I was on the road all the time. I was never home. And there was one, so I wasn't able to catch him, at the shows when he played in New York because I wasn't there. And there was one period where I had just gotten off the road with Lenny, and I looked in the paper and the Village Voice, and I saw Elvin Jones at the Blue Note.
Mm,
I'm like, oh, I got to run down and see him. I ran down there as fast as I could because I think it was the last night. Um, and I took my cymbal and I watched both sets, and it was utterly incredible. And afterwards, I went upstairs and I asked him if he would sign my symbol. And he smiled this smile from ear to ear. And he says, "Of course, Cindy." And he signed it for me. It was so
beautiful.
great. Yeah, Elvin. I remember so many incredible times seeing Elvin as well. At the Vanguard, one time I saw him and I was sitting on drummers row, which is like the benches, where all the drummers tried to get because you could see the drums like just really up close, and he started playing flam taps. Plata, plata, plata,
Yeah,
plata, plata. And he says, "Do you know what those are, Cindy? Do you play those?" And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I play them. He says, "Good, because they are really good for the ride cymbal. They help your right hand." And he just was playing flam taps. It was so cool.
man. That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, you also, I wanted to ask you about this connection with the elders because on your first album, there's Joe Henderson and, Buster Williams and Larry Willis, and the rest is, I think, your generation, more or less, right? Kenny Garrett and these guys and
Mhm.
Wallace. And like, how did you immediately connect with the elders so much, like, especially, I mean, to have a debut album and have Joe Henderson on tenor, that's a bit mind blowing. I mean, how was that for that? Like you, the vibe in the room, and like when you come there with your own compositions and being a band leader. How did that go?
With Joe, it was amazing because I had gone down to the Vanguard to see him play. I just wanted to hear him play, and I started talking to him on the break, um, and he asked me if I wanted to sit in, and I did,
Oof.
and I told him that I'm doing a record, and I would love for him to be on the record if he would consider it, and he said, "Yeah." And so he with those glasses, he looks like
Yeah,
that. And he said, "Yeah." And so, Joe Fields called him and he showed up. He did it. He played on the record. And um, he then asked me if I wanted to join his band and go to Europe.
really, I didn't know.
So,
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
How was that like? I mean,
Very interesting. Yeah, it was very interesting. The first gig was musically it was incredible. The first show was in Paris, and Joe was just finishing another tour, an all-star band, and I guess something happened and he had to go home. So he went back to San Francisco, to the Bay where he was living, and he didn't make the first gigs in Paris.
Oh shit. Oh man.
And Wallace was just finishing a tour with Tony Williams, and so he flew over to Paris because he wanted to see the first shows, and we were going to, hang out. And so Joe, before he split, he was there, in the hotel, and he says, "Well, you guys should do the gig." So we got a bass player and piano player, and we did the gig at New Morning that Joe was supposed to do.
Wow. Okay.
And then we got to with Joe's band, we got to, I think it was just outside of Geneva, somewhere it's just outside of Geneva. And Joe got there, showed up for that, which was the second show that we were going to do. And then we did the tour, and it was pretty amazing playing with Joe, because he was an innovator,
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but some funny stuff happened. I remember this young saxophone player brought a saxophone to that gig, and he wanted Joe to take a look at it and see the horn. And Joe looked at the horn, and he walked up on stage with it. And so he played that set with the horn.
Wow.
And after the set, he walked off the stage, he walked to the dressing room, and he split
Oh
with the
shit.
horn. And so the saxophone player came up to me and he says, Cindy, my name is, I don't even remember the poor guy's name. He said, my name is so and so. That was my horn that Joe has. Do you know how I can get it back? I was like, dude, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. I said, you should go to the hotel, I told him where the hotel was. I'm like, go see if you can talk to him. I don't know if I don't think he ever got that horn back.
Okay. Was, was that the
I
first
don't
time
know
in
if he
Europe
did.
with you with Joe? Was that the first time that you came to Europe as a jazz musician, or
It was actually, yeah.
really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it
Interesting.
was. It
Wow.
was. Yeah. It was amazing playing the gigs that I did with him, because he never really said anything. He didn't say much. He just kind of told you what the tunes were and counted them off, and that was pretty much it.
Interesting.
He didn't want to get into that, so it was cool. We just hit. Yeah. It's nice. And I was grateful that he played on my record, because, like I said,
Yeah.
he's
I
such a
mean,
beautiful player. And Kenny Barron, I met Kenny Barron, hanging out on the scene. I sat in with Freddie Hubbard, and Kenny was in the band, and I saw
mm,
Kenny play with, many different people. And so him being on the scene, and, me being on the scene, and him being a New York area guy, it was easier to catch up with him, because he was around and playing all the time.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
was grateful to have him on too. He's such a
Oh,
such an
he's
amazing player. It's just he's very subtle when he wants to be, and not when he wants to be, but in the right way. He's
yeah.
just a consummate pianist, such an amazing musician.
Yeah. I saw him last year with Jonathan and Kiyoshi, a trio, and I was just like, I mean, the guy's 79 or 80, Kenny, and he's playing amazingly. He's
Yeah.
he's I mean, you're just speechless after that. It's like, wow, okay.
Hmm.
Uh, how important was Wallace actually for you? Because was he like the first really big gig that you got also? Because you did so many records with him and getting to know, I guess, Ron Carter and Mulgrew and all these guys also through him. And how did the story with Wallace begin?
We met at Berkeley, because we
Ah, okay,
both went to Berkeley College of Music.
okay.
Um, and then he was telling me that I should go to New York. And I said, I'm not ready to go to New York. I need to practice. I need to learn more. And he said, Cindy, you're ready. He said, you need to go. He said, there are all levels, from amateurs to innovators in New York. So whatever level you go at, when you're there, when you get there, you're going to grow and you're going to learn, because there's always somebody who's got, more knowledge than you, so, because there are innovators there, and there's everything
Yeah,
in between, so you need to go. And I still was resisting. And finally I said, I'm going. I got to go to New York. Okay, you're right. Wherever I'm going to learn, and it doesn't, I'll just start to grow when I'm there, and which is what happened. I just started growing the moment I stepped on New York soil because
Yeah,
there's so much energy there. Um, and so I went to New York with him, and it was amazing because he had already, as you said, he had already been playing,
yeah.
gigs with people. He was already touring around. Um, he took me to a session. He was already playing with Art Blakey, and that's how I met Art Blakey in person.
Mm,
Two people told Art Blakey about me, which one was Wallace, and the other was Art's daughter, Evelyn, because she was a singer, and I did some gigs with her, and she taped them, and she gave him the tape, so he heard me play, and Wallace told him about me, and Wallace invited me to this record session that the Messengers were doing. It was the Jazz Messengers and guest artist drummer from Japan. Um, I forget his name. What's his name? I forget, but it's fact. You can find the
yeah, yeah,
record.
yeah.
But at any rate, he took me to that. He invited me to that session, and I went. And Art just opened up to me, and he just welcomed me being there. He didn't have any issue with me being there, and he called me his redhead friend because he couldn't remember my name. And then we became like father and daughter after that.
Beautiful. Yeah,
But being with Wallace was amazing because to me he was the genius of my peer group. I mean, he knew so
yeah.
much about drums. He knew so much about harmony and melody. And he was the one cat that I could talk to about drums on the level of a drummer,
Really. Oh, wow.
and he was not a drummer. We could talk about construction of drums. We could talk about, you know, tone and sound and how to get sound out of the drums, tuning the drums. We could obviously talk about drumming concepts and rhythms, and he knew all about all of that. He was just really a genius. He left way, way too soon, and such
Yeah,
an amazing trumpet player. His tone, because Miles is my favorite. I love Freddie, and I love all these different cats. Uh, but he coming directly out of Clifford Brown
yeah.
and Freddie and Miles
Miles. Yeah.
mainly. Um, it just was really amazing for my ear because that's my favorite sound. He played Martin committees like Miles did. He got the same Giardinelli mouthpiece like Miles had. And so I learned all about all the mouthpieces, about the bore sizes, about trumpet construction, and I heard all the Arbon's studies every day. I heard all the everything every day. And, it was like we would get up and see who could get to the piano first or see who could get to the record player first to put on, the music of the day or whatever the
Mm,
favorite stuff was. It was amazing hanging with him because he knew so much about music. He was truly an innovator and to me, the genius of my peer group for sure.
mm, yeah. Yeah. I love what he did. It reminds me so much of Miles's, quintet, what he did in a modern way. The same time, like
Hmm.
as Wynton's band with Thane, they were kind of very similar in pushing the boundaries a bit. Like, and especially, you played with Wallace and Thane played with Wynton, and for me, those are like two. Speaking of trumpets with drummers, like such strong energy bands. I mean, that's like really, really cool when I listen back to those CDs and incredible. But Cindy, I wanted to ask you this. Like you mentioned Lenny before, and uh, how did that happen? So you're playing with Joe Henderson, you're hanging out with Art Blakey, so Alvin Jones, and then comes Lenny Kravitz. Like, I mean, it kind of you cannot connect it. I mean, but it happened. Like, how did you fall into that boat? I mean, how did that happen? I mean, I guess you told that
we
story many
we
times, but
connected and we connected and it grew into an incredible connection because I played with him altogether 17 years.
wow,
And the way I first met him was through Antoine, Wallace's brother,
brother,
tenor
yeah,
player. Antoine had recorded on a record with Lenny, so he knew Lenny and they were friends. And he Antoine called me and he says, do you know Lenny Kravitz? And I said, no. He said, have you heard his music? And I said, not that I'm aware of. And I probably heard his songs like somewhere, but I didn't know his music. Um, and he said, well, he's the guy who used to be married to Lisa Bonet. And I said, I know Lisa because I watched the Cosby Show all the
Sure.
time. I grew up on that. So of course I was a fan of hers and I knew who she was. Um, and Antoine said, well, Lenny's a friend and he calls me every now and then, and he's been looking for a drummer for about a year and a half.
Wow.
If he calls again and he's still looking, would you like to talk to him? And I said, sure. And because Antoine said, you'll like this guy. He likes Gretsch drums and Kay Zildjian cymbals, and he likes Miles and Coltrane. I said, he's a rock and roller and he likes all that.
Really?
I
I
like
didn't
him
know that.
already.
Wow.
I said, I like him already. If he's got those kind of ears, yes, I definitely want to meet him. And so Antoine called me one day and he says, yeah, I got Lenny on the line. Want me to patch you through? And so he did a three-way call, and I spoke to Lenny, and Lenny said, do you have drums set up in your room? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, can you play some?
Oh,
And so
wow.
I got on my drums and I
Okay.
started playing. And first thing I was thinking was that it probably wasn't that clear because I wasn't playing that soft. And you get this phone speaker, which is really small, so I figured it was going to be distorted. Um, and I got back to the phone and I said, well, yeah, could you hear that? And he said, yeah, I could hear it. I'm in LA. Can you fly out here right now? And I
Wow.
said, okay. And he said, yeah, I want you to fly to LA. And he said, just pack for 2 days, no strings attached. Just come. I want you to play with my band, see how it feels, and then I'll send you home. I said, okay, that sounds like fun. I had actually never been to LA. And I thought
Amazing.
this would be cool, great chance to meet some new musicians and go to LA for a couple days, and then I'll come back home. And that's all I was expecting. And so I packed for 2 days. They couldn't get me a ticket for that day, but they got me a ticket for 6 a.m. the next morning. So I flew out to LA, and Lenny showed up at the airport himself to pick me up. It was amazing. And I really didn't know him, but I saw this guy with these locks and with this rock and roll clothing, and I'm this hip clothing, and he had these leather pants on and whatever. And I'm like, that's got to be him. There's nobody else that looks like that in this baggage claim area. It's got to be him. So I said, hey, are Lenny? And he said, yeah, Cindy. And so, we we left, and the first place he took me to uh was to his mother's house. And we drove up to his mom's house, and he said, yeah, we're going to go meet my mom. And I didn't know who his mom was. And she opened the door, and it was Roxy Roker, who I also knew because I grew up watching the Jeffersons. And I was floored, not just because it was Roxy Roker, but when I came into the house and met her, I was floored because of how genuine she was and how
Mm.
sweet she was. I fell in love with her the first second I met her because she was so kind, so nice, so down to earth. I'm like, wow, your mom is incredible. I was, and when I got to know her, I'll tell you, she was one of the very few women that I've ever met in my life who I wished could be best friends with my mom.
Mm.
And I adore my mom. I protect her with everything I've got. And so I wouldn't want anybody around here who's not kosher. I wanted those two to be friends. They never even met, but I was always wishful that they would become best friends because she was just such a sweet, amazing person.
Beautiful.
But that's the first place he took me to. The second place he took me to was to a casting that he was doing for an actor. And so I waited, he did his casting, he came out, and then we left and we went to the place that he was staying at, which was a house that Rick Rubin had just purchased. So there was nothing in the house. It was like barren. There was no furniture, no nothing, no instruments. There was nothing there. And he had called SIR, instrument rentals, to get some gear. And the gear hadn't shown up yet. so everybody's sitting around just kind of waiting on the instruments to arrive. And I started to see um, people come in. And I saw somebody come in with a bass drum pedal, and another cat had some sticks, and somebody else had a snare drum or something. I'm like, this is not SIR. These are drummers coming in. I think there's an auditioning happening.
Oh
There were like
shit.
40 drummers who came.
Wow. Oh man. Okay.
And I was, I had jet lag. I was tired. I didn't really sleep because I was excited about the trip. And, you know, so I went outside and found a lawn chair and I sat in it and I fell asleep. It was sunny and warm. It was cold in New York. LA was sunny and warm because this was in December, and I fell asleep out there and his assistant came running out. I don't even know how long I was asleep for. I just dozed. And she said, Cindy, Deborah came out and she says, Cindy, Lenny was looking for you and he had to start the auditions because he couldn't find you. He wanted you to play first. You have to come right now. And so, one drummer had played before me. I came and we played and we played a blues, we played something else, and we played his song that was getting ready to be released called Are You Gonna Go My Way? And we played and he says, cancel the auditions. I want Cindy. I choose
Oh
her.
man.
And
Wow.
so I went back outside after he said that, and I guess his manager said, "Well, you've got you've got like 39 drummers waiting. It's not cool. You got to have to audition them. You can't just have them sitting there." So he auditioned them, and he found one guy that he liked in that bunch. And there was another guy, Michael Lee, who had left a message with the management saying that he was flying in from London. He says, I don't care if the auditions are closed. I'm coming. I'm flying in from London. I'll be here tomorrow and I'm coming straight to wherever the audition is being held. I want to audition for Lenny. So he came. So the next day, Lenny had this other drummer who was, I don't know where, I don't remember his name. He had us play opposite each other and he still chose me. And then when Michael Lee showed up, he did the same thing, and he still chose me to be in the band. So I was in the basement of Rick Rubin's house for 2 weeks learning songs,
Wow.
rehearsing and learning songs. And they would toss me pizza. We lived, and I know I lived off of Damiano's pizza. They had this incredible pizza, spinach dough crust, no cheese. It was amazing. So we lived off that pizza for 2 weeks, and I had two changes of clothes. So I was constantly washing my stuff out. Um, but it was great fun. We played down there, and I was down there just learning the songs. And I came after Christmas and stayed through New Year's and past New Year's. And at the end of that 2 weeks, we did the video, Are You Gonna Go My Way? Which
Wow.
actually didn't know that I was going to be in a video either. I had no idea what any of that was about. I was so naive to any of that. I didn't know who Lenny was, at first. I didn't know what a video, I didn't know how to make a video or any of that stuff. Um, and at the end of
Amazing.
of this video session, Lenny and his manager and Craig, the guitar player, his assistant Deborah, and the original bass player Tony, they walked me outside, and Lenny said, "So you want to join my band?" And I said, "Yeah. When does it start?" And he started laughing. He said, "It started 2 weeks ago," which is when I auditioned.
That's amazing.
Um, so yeah, that was amazing. And that started a whole thing, and it's I love the way that I got introduced to that to Lenny and that scene, because I was totally naive. I didn't know. I wanted to play with Miles. My head was in a whole nother place. I was not thinking about that at all. And so Lenny used to laugh at me. He said, "You never knew what you were stepping into, did you?" And I was like, "No, I had no idea." So I like that he knew that
Awesome.
my desire to play with him and my like of him and the guys of the band was completely honest. There was no angle there because I had no angle. I didn't know who they were you know
That's
so
amazing.
that was a really cool, yeah, it developed into just a really, really cool 17-year playing relationship.
Yeah. Did you have a rock background from before? I mean, I guess you studied like the meters or some funk stuff, and but James Brown or like, But did you listen to rock music? Like
I listened to it. I grew up in a
you
household
did?
where we
Okay.
had everything. You know, my
Okay.
mom, she doesn't play anymore, but she was a classical violinist, so we
Okay.
had classical music. My dad liked jazz. My older sister had a 200 album collection
Okay.
of all kinds of stuff, from Coltrane to Shaka Khan and Rufus to James Brown to the Beatles to, Miles, all periods of Miles. She had everything,
Okay.
and so I grew up with all of that. My brother had stuff that he liked. My younger sister and I, we had stuff that I liked and we liked, rather. And so there was all of that. When I got to Berkeley, I played in all kinds of bands. I played in an odd meter fusion band. I played in a vocal fusion band. I played in quintets. I played in funk bands. I played in um, uh, Latin, African rhythm based bands, sessions I did with that kind of stuff. So I played in a lot of things, which was really great about Berkeley because it opened up my exposure. And I liked all of that, so
Yeah.
when it came time for Lenny, it was not a stretch for me because I liked a lot of the stuff he liked. I like Hendrix. I like the Beatles, I like and love James Brown, um, I hadn't really delved into a lot of Zeppelin, but I got into Zeppelin real heavy. I love John Bonham.
Bonham, yeah.
you Um, and so, we got along. Tony Williams is my hero, and he played all kinds of stuff. So I was listening to all of Tony's avant-garde stuff, all of his straight ahead stuff, his jazz rock stuff, every incarnation of that and everything that Tony ever played in. So I loved all of that. So that was all stuff that I played, I practiced, I listened to, and like I said, I genuinely dug it. So people who only knew me from playing straight ahead, they were surprised,
Yeah.
like, what can I do? What? But, they just didn't know that I grew up on that and I liked all that too,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a stretch for me to get into that vibe, because I dig that vibe,
Yeah. How was the process like working with Lenny on those tunes? I mean, he plays drums, he plays basically all the instruments, right? And like,
Yeah.
did he have demos like of tunes and he told you how to play, or like how did that go for you? Because in jazz we know, I give you a lead sheet and you're just like, yeah, you make up something on the spot. I mean, and like how did that go in Lenny's band? I mean, the work process, you as a drummer
And
especially.
Lenny's, yes, absolutely. It was great for me that he was a drummer because the communication was really easy. If he wanted me to play something, he'd sit at the drum and say, "Oh, this is the groove I want here," and I'd say, "Okay." There was not a hard way to communicate because he's a drummer. He knows what he wants on drums. But with his band, it's parts. You're playing his parts on the records that he recorded.
Yeah.
So he would give us all recordings of the music that we were to learn, and then we would learn the music and we would learn the parts. Bass player learned the parts bar by bar. I learned the parts bar by bar. Guitar player, um, he learned his own parts that he played on, or he learned Lenny's parts or whatever. Piano player learned all the parts. That's how it went in his band. Um, and for me, you know, I had to always add a little something.
Of course, come on.
So I would add things, even if they were just subtle and only I knew. I had to do that. Even if it was just adding a flam in front of something, or a drag or a rough, or, ending something a little differently, or changing, making the sticking a little more interesting for me. I had to do something, because I'm a creative musician.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
need to do that. So for me, I would do little things, and could be just adding an upbeat somewhere, or adding this or that, or like I said, the other examples I gave. So that was fun for me to add things and see what I could add that did not detract from what he wanted, but that added and uplifted the music, but also satisfied me in a way that I could, be a contributor in another way than just playing the grooves.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I say that, but it wasn't just playing the grooves to me. It was really ingesting what was there and making it mine, which, to me is a natural way to play something and to feel something and to have other people feel it too, which is what you want. You want
Yeah,
other people to feel it too. So, I found ways to that I felt satisfied everybody in the situation. That's what my goal was anyway, to satisfy him as the band leader, to satisfy the audience, to satisfy, of course, the musicians on stage, and to also satisfy myself.
yeah,
That was always my goal. And if I wasn't reaching that, I would change something, to make sure I did.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Adam told me we should not have too much time, but like, that I just wanted to ask you, how does,
Oh, I have a what we have a little more time. Yeah, I haven't
yeah,
because I have another interview, but I have a
okay.
little more time. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
I
just
do.
wanted to ask you, how does what you all this you said now with Lenny, how does this differ with Carlos? I mean, obviously it's a different story on a personal level as well, but musically, I was teaching one student today, Black Magic Woman, which is funny because now we have this talk today, and I was like, man, this is still such a strong tune, I mean, it's
Mhm.
Fleetwood Mac, okay, and but Oya Como Wa I taught last week, and how did you step into those shoes and playing those tunes? Because it's a way more loose situation in a sense. Like, how does this differ? Let's say these two gigs. I mean, these are different stories, but still.
Yeah, it's definitely a looser situation. Playing with Carlos is absolutely incredible because he's such an amazing guitarist. First
Yeah,
of all, he's got a sound like nobody's business. So the sound is just exciting just to hear the tone. If you hear one note, if I hear one note of Miles play, I'm good. I don't even need to hear anything else. And Carlos has a sound that is similar in the way that it's identifiable and it's very pleasing. His sound is beautiful. I love his tone. Um, I love his tone when he's playing rhythms. I love his tone when he's playing lead. So the chordal thing is great when he's playing chords. Just his tone, just in general, is beautiful. Um, he's got a big Rolodex of musical ideas in his head because he listens to so much stuff.
mm,
So he wants influences that come from all over the place, from every genre. So again, he's a person who you need to be well versed in different styles if you're going to play with him. And you need to get to know them because he's
yeah,
going to call on them. And you got to be ready for that. Um, Playing with him is different in another respect because he wants the core sound and the core that made whatever song we're
yeah,
playing happen and be um, so great in terms of the feel and the translation to the listener and the feel of the translation to the listener. But he wants you to add yourself. He wants you to add you in there. He wants you to make it fresh and to play something different. He doesn't want you to play exactly the same thing all the time.
yeah,
He's okay with you playing something different, which is great because you keep the core and then you can feel free to add stuff on top of that core as you feel it or not,
yeah, yeah.
which I love. So playing with him is it's a joy, you know. And he likes to go different places. So not one version of the songs that we play is exactly the same as it was the day before or the day before or the year before. It's always
I noticed
slightly
that. Yeah,
different. Even
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just a little different. There's always a slight difference, There's always a difference in the arrangements. Sometimes he'll change an arrangement with cues or without. You just got to follow right in real time, as we're playing, which is fun, because you have to be on your toes and you have to pay attention. You have to
yeah,
be present. And that's what he wants. He wants presence and he wants energy and he wants a great feel above all. And he wants a great vibe and he wants you to push the music forward. So if you're doing all those things, then you're going to satisfy him, and he likes that. And I like that about him, because that's fun for me as a drummer.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I got some bootlegs. Like a student of mine is like a he gets this stuff somewhere, and I got some stuff that you played with Carlos. Like, and it's really like it's true. I think you play Oye Como Va and stuff like that. It's changes the vibe so much always. I mean, not like the core, like you said, it's there, but it's like beautiful
Yeah,
band, and with Benny on bass, and I mean, it's like I love it.
yeah, it's great.
It's
The
so
whole band
beautiful.
is great.
Yeah, it's
Benny's
killing.
amazing bass player to play with. I have him play with me, as much as possible. Um, and all the guys are great. The percussionists are
Oh,
great. Paoli and
absolutely.
Carl, they're like they're so incredible. They raise the bar, and so you have to keep raising the bar because they're going to keep raising the bar.
Yeah,
Tommy's great, and Dave, the singers are great, Ray and Andy. So it's a really incredible band. All the musicians are band leaders.
yeah,
So they
totally.
all have a vision. But they all are great sidemen too. To me, to be a great band leader, you have to be a great sideman because
Absolutely.
you have to know how to help a situation sound great. And that's your job.
Yeah,
You have to make the leader sound great. You have to make the person next to you, all the other people sound great, as well as you sounding great. You have to figure out how to do that.
yeah,
And all these people know how to do that.
yeah. It's a
You can
team
depend
sport.
on them as a
Yeah,
band, which is it's a great thing. So
yeah.
yeah, it's a cool situation.
Cindy, I'll let you go then. We are not,
Okay, and I forgot to
but
say that the name of my new record is called Coherence.
coherence. Okay,
The
beautiful.
title track, yes, thank you. The title track was actually already released on Carlos's latest record called Sentient. And on my record, I made it a little bit differently by adding some spoken word and some beautiful playing with Matt Garrison and myself actually on as bookends on the front and the back of that song with me doing some spoken word about my feelings of coherence, a little poem that I wrote, and then the rest of the record just flows. But it's called Coherence, so please look out for that.
Hopefully, you'll bring the band to Europe as
Yes,
under
looking
your own
forward
name
to
would be
that.
nice. Would be nice to see you. So, thanks so much
Yeah,
for
I look
sharing some
forward.
of these thoughts. Really appreciate it, and stay strong and
Thank
so
you.
positive and
It's
everything. So
awesome. I
beautiful.
enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Me too.